Philippines has had so much potential, still has so much potential, and now finally the potential is being realized.
It's been an exciting decade, I think, not only for the Philippines, but for the whole of Southeast Asia.
And I think it's a wonderful time to be looking at our country with fresh eyes.
We are a live museum of how a free democracy builds itself.
The world's second largest archipelago, the Republic of the Philippines, is located in Southeast Asia. It is divided into 3 distinct administrative and economic regions. The capital city is Manila. A heightened sense of optimism and change is sweeping the Philippines. Once known as Southeast Asia's economic laggard, the Philippines of today is trying to bring in the promise of clean politics and national prosperity. In 2010, Benigno Aquino won a landslide victory to become the nation's 15th president. He inherited a nation entrenched in poverty and a government plagued by corruption. While he isn't immune to criticism, the Filipino people are giving the president a chance to finally bring change to the republic.
I want to leave the world a lot better than how I found it. And I want to see this country transform to such an extent that people who have not visited us in the last 2 years and in the next 4 will probably say they really can't recognize the country anymore. I inherited a mess. We were called the sick man of Asia. We posted 6.3% growth in GDP for the first quarter, 5.9% in the second quarter, which gives us an average of 6.1% for the first semester, which is above our projections of between 5 to 6%. In the midst of the global economic uncertainty. I guess what I'm trying to say, the bottom line is, the Philippines has had so much potential, still has so much potential, and now finally the potential is being realized.
Cuts in interest rates, low inflation, and the government's plan to spend more aggressively are renewing investor confidence. Doing business in the Philippines is not without its challenges, but it is now one that is more transparent and open.
The fundamentals are very strong. Consumption is there. People are positive. Investments, domestic investments is literally overflowing. The other thing that we can really be proud of is that we've stayed the course. President Aquino has sacrificed political capital to do the right thing. This is the kind of leadership that the Philippines needs. It's about implementing the right rules. It's about collecting the right taxes. And people are slowly but surely also changing. People are now saying, no, let's do it right this time around.
Despite the negative impact of the global economic crisis on the country's export industry, the Philippines is performing better than its regional neighbors. In 2010, the country's real GDP increased by 7.6%, its highest in more than 30 years. The International Monetary Fund estimates the Philippines' GDP at $216 billion in 2011.
Why is that happening and why is that a good thing at this point in time? Number one, we have this consumer-led growth that's quite unique to us. Number two, our government is far more serious and far more organized from a macroeconomic point of view at this point in its history. We have the largest amount of foreign exchange reserves ever in our history, over $70 billion. That's unheard of in our country. That gives it a sense of stability and gives the currency a strength that it has not had in the past. At the same time, on the fiscal side, our management of our finances as a country, we are in a far more stable state than ever before. Our deficit as a percentage of GDP is far lower now than ever before. That gives our government the wherewithal, the tools to be able to pump prime our economy. But it certainly puts us apart to the rest of the world at this time.
The Philippine government realizes that simply relying on domestic sources for capital does not improve its liquidity position, prompting a strong push for foreign direct investment into the country. grand reforms are already pursued by the administration to trigger further change through more efficient business processes and a level playing field. For many market players, the good governance thrust has been beneficial. An increase in government spending under the Public-Private Partnership Program is likely to stimulate economic growth in 2012.
This is a narrow window of opportunity for our country where so many good things are happening, and I think it's a wonderful time to be looking at our country with fresh eyes. We now believe that our country is headed towards much more progress than we've seen in recent history. We now believe that our country can move forward. We now believe that we can fall in step with the rest of Asia as the area of the world where the greatest growth and prosperity will take place in the coming decades and in the coming century.
The Philippines is tackling its political, social, and economic problems head-on. The Philippines was one of the richest countries in Asia in the 1950s, second only to Japan, but has never really been able to achieve the growth of the Asian tiger nations. Has the Philippines finally turned a sharp corner?
This administration has shown the world that the Filipinos can get things done in the right way. The drive, the push of President Aquino against corruption, I know some people would say it's a nuisance. No, that's not a nuisance. That's the centerpiece. 95, if not 100% of our problems in governance, in the government has to do with corruption. It's governance, it's transparency, It's not as if there's not enough resources. We've proven that. We haven't raised taxes, and yet we have been able to provide a lot more services because we were able to save 30% off the cuff. Right there and there, same project, same configuration, but we were able to do it 30% cheaper. That translates to efficiency, that translates to productivity, and that translates to more resources that can be applied.
The world economy or the financial system recognizes that we are deciding on a more logical basis, more transparent, more consistent. We've gotten therefore, because of the managing of the deficit relative to GDP, we have gotten a lot of upgrades from three of them, well actually four. Three of the majors and one also major credit rating agencies, which brings down our cost of borrowing. So we have recovered a lot that was lost due to leakage. We still have a deficit, but the deficit gets financed at a lower interest rate. And we are in a situation where we are able to swap old debt that was very expensive and close to maturation with lesser interest payments and longer maturation.
A recent World Bank report states that poverty has remained at about the same level during the last decade, with a little over a quarter of the population below the poverty line.
If you eliminate corruption, you begin to eliminate poverty. I think what that means is, given very limited resources of government, you have to spend wisely. You have to make sure that every peso you spend goes to the projects that they're meant to be spent for. You reduce the cost of, the cost of corruption. And that's what this administration has begun to do.
Many corporations in the country are now implementing social programs that benefit the poorest of the poor. The Philippines is one of the premier centers in Asia for research, training, and advocacy in corporate governance matters.
There is a very great sense in our country now that the private sector has to do its part in uplifting the poor and giving opportunities to the poor. Because, first of all, from a pragmatic point of view, I guess we have to admit that uplifting the poor and eliminating poverty will, at the end of the day, improve our ability to market our products. They are our customers. But more importantly, I think we are one country. We have one future. We have to work together towards a better life for all of our people. And that consciousness is very deeply embedded in our private sector as well.
With approximately 95 million people, the Philippines is the 12th largest country in terms of population. And the local Commission on Population is expecting this to increase to 101.2 million by 2014. Domestically, the government is investing in education programs to raise the quality of its human capital.
We believe that the Filipino people are our greatest national resource. This is proven time and again, even during the dark ages when our countrymen would go elsewhere, given the right environment, really shine in various professions. How do we take it to the extreme? Then if the chief national asset really are the people, then it behooves us to invest in the people.
As a community of people, we are generally very hospitable, we're English speaking, and we're comfortable with different types of nationalities. But more than anything, I guess our resiliency, our positive nature. People say we're the happiest people in the world. Even under the most adverse circumstances, even now, we have some very difficult situations in the city of Manila with the kind of floods that we have. You don't see people complaining. People adjust, they help each other out. There's a bayanihan spirit that's always there. Is our people. That's really our strongest quality.
The Philippines has a big talent pool, with 11% working abroad, making overseas remittances an integral contributor to the nation's GDP. Filipinos fill a global demand for added value positions that involve technical competency and English proficiency.
Overseas Filipino workers, we exported a lot because of our proficiency in English and good skill sets and work attitude. And it helped the economy a lot for the past 2 decades. But with the global recession right now, a lot of them are coming back. Not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of opportunities await them here in the Philippines. One among them would be franchising, which has a high success rate. It's very inspiring. From being an employee or in the service industry abroad, coming back, they become entrepreneurs. Very inspiring.
The 21st century has been defined by Asian